Welcome, fellow plebs. My name is Sean, and this is
Tribunus Plebis.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. It's great to have you all here again. I'll tell you what, we are in some crazy times, and I am feeling them. So what we are going to cover today is political stuff. Biden, Cuomo, Tanden, and our own failures will all be on deck. I feel like an entirely political tirade is brewing here, so I don't know. I guess just buckle up and deal with it. So how about Joe Biden to kick things off? There's a lot here with this guy, but let's just focus first on, I guess, two major issues here. It's his first month in office, and he's already opening up a new detention facility, aka a concentration camp, a camp which Trump had actually not opened, on the border. And he has already started blowing up brown people in the Middle East. Yup, he runs on Trump being evil for locking up kids, and then opens up a camp for kids that Trump closed. Yep, this is actually life in this country right now. Of course, this was all very much predictable. In fact, we predicted it right here in this very podcast. We let you know that Joe was hawkish and warmongering to a fault, and that the camps were originally started under the watch of the administration in which he was the vice president. We also let you know that Kamala Harris was garbage and would, at best, just go along with everything because it is politically useful for her to do so. And that was the at-best scenario. But the reality is that Kamala Harris is a bad person with just awful politics, and she shouldn't be trusted because if directly harming people is the path to the presidency, she will directly harm people. Do not believe that she is a good person. This last election, we hired a deeply conservative corporate suit with really nice veneers to be president of this country. That would be Biden, by the way, just to be clear. And his running mate was even worse. What did we expect would happen? You know what the big issue is right now amongst my friends who identify as Democrats or liberals or even just anti-Republicans? They're upset that people like me are calling this stuff out. They keep saying things like, "It's only been a month, bro. He has to fix all the things that Trump broke. Give him a chance, man." Nope, wrong. Biden isn't fixing anything Trump broke, because in his eyes, Trump didn't break anything. In Biden's eyes, Trump did everything right. He just said the wrong words and didn't mask it. And these liberal people out there in the media, they agree with Joe. They keep saying things like about how nice it is to blow foreign brown people up without the mean taunts included. They talk about how nice it is to open new concentration camps, detention facilities for children on the border without the racist language. See, these terrible human beings that this country put in power, and I'm involved in this as well, we all are. They never actually viewed Trump's policies as being bad. They just viewed Trump as a bit of a bore. The Democrats largely supported his policies. Go back and listen to episode 6 for a little more on this. They basically agreed with Trump. Orange Man was bad. Orange Man's policies were good. Orange Man's words were bad. But why were Orange Man's words bad to people like Biden and the entire Clinton wing of the party? It's because it gave them nothing to hide behind. Unfortunately, the people who keep telling me to give Biden more time and the people who praise Biden for using more polite language while running the same inhumane, deadly, and sociopathic policies as Trump can't see this. Some won't admit it because they just simply agree with Biden and Trump but didn't like Trump's rhetoric. But most of the others just refuse to deal with this reality because they are wholly connected by their ego to the idea that they voted for the quote-unquote good guy. They really think that Biden is better than all of this. It's actually kind of shocking still how different groups of my friends react to these episodes in various posts I make on social media. If I dump on Trump for something he did, all the liberals share it and the conservatives are mad at me. If I dump on Biden for the exact same thing, the exact same action, conservative types share it and the liberals dislike me. And in both cases, it's the exact same thing with the exact same outcome, just a different face. Almost a year into this, and it's still quite surprising, even as I knew it would be like this, even as I basically understand why it's like this. That's how deeply these monsters have affected our brains. Now let's look at two more issues that Biden ran on: student debt forgiveness and the $15 minimum wage. He immediately caved on both of these under pressure from absolutely nobody. He got elected and then just immediately began negotiating against himself. And I mean, negotiating against himself is being very generous, if I'm being honest. The reality is that Biden was never going to do any of those things. He just said he would. Which is something else that we talked about right here on this very podcast right from the start. That Joe Biden would not fight for any of these things. Joe Biden won't fight for these things not because he's stupid or weak or a coward. He won't fight for them because he does not actually want them to go into effect. The $15 minimum wage was set to be put into the special budget reconciliation bill, but it got pulled out. Budget reconciliation is basically a once-a-year bill that goes through Congress, and the important part of it for this story is that budget reconciliation requires a simple majority, 51 votes, to pass the Senate. And the Democrats have 51 votes, with Kamala Harris serving as vice president. The hang-up here is that for an item to be included in reconciliation, it has to affect federal spending or revenue. It has to affect the budget and whether this effect is incidental or not. This incidental effect issue is the basics of what is called the Byrd Rule, the particulars of which are not terribly important here. What is important is that there is a special dork in charge of deciding what does and does not fit within that fairly broad definition. This person's job is called the Senate Parliamentarian, and is currently held by a woman by the name of Elizabeth McDonough. Right now, the parliamentarian has ruled that the $15 minimum wage cannot be included in the budget reconciliation bill, effectively killing the wage raise before it ever got a chance, because there is no way to get 60 votes for a minimum wage hike of any sort, let alone to $15 in a regular Senate bill at this point. But, and this is the key here, Kamala Harris can simply overrule the parliamentarian and put the $15 minimum wage back into the bill. It is literally that simple. And yeah, I'm sure some paperwork would have to be filled out, but all it takes is the vice president, the head of the Senate, to simply ignore the parliamentarian's advice. And that's really all the parliamentarian can do. Advise. It is, ultimately, up to the vice president. Now, this is a little rare. As far as I can tell, the last VP to overturn a parliamentarian's advice was in 1975, when Nelson Rockefeller, vice president under Gerald Ford, forced a change to the filibuster through over the objections of the parliamentarian of the time. Another precedent set during my lifetime was in 2001, when a Republican-controlled Senate led by Trent Lott actually fired a parliamentarian, a man named Robert Dove, because Dove kept advising against them. And you know what I haven't even touched on? The complete garbage nature of the proposed wage hike. It wouldn't even hit $15 until 2025, even if Biden manages to pass this thing. The wage should have been $15 years ago, By the time 2025 rolls around, the wage should probably be over $20, maybe even more. The minimum wage hasn't changed since 2009. This is preposterous. The point here is that the Democrats have the path to doing this, and they should do it. What they don't have is, one, political courage, but even more importantly, the will to do it. And by will, I mean they just don't want to raise the minimum wage, because the people who pay them are the same people who might have to pay us just a little bit more money. And helping us is just something that the Democratic Party seemingly cannot abide. And that inability to help us, or the lack of interest in helping us, whichever way you prefer to frame that, it comes out yet again in that other thing I mentioned, student debt relief. Biden ran on forgiving $50,000 of student debt to all students. Not a perfect solution, but not worthless either. $50,000 of debt relief would free tens of thousands and maybe even more of young people and those with families from crippling payments from horrifically predatory lenders, including our own government. That is what Biden ran on, $50,000. As soon as he was in office, though, the forgiveness changed to $10,000, and only to those who qualify via means testing. And now the means testing is about free college, too. Certain income brackets and whatnot, and what the fuck? Fuck this guy. College loan forgiveness might be the single biggest economic generator that can be done in one fell swoop. Biden can literally do this with an executive order. He could literally do it tomorrow or however long it takes to sort out and jot down the legalese so he can sign it. What is that, 2-3 days max? Just get it done. The entirety of loan forgiveness for college education is a bit much to get into in this episode by itself, but I do want to wade in here on some of the main arguments against this, the sorts of nonsense and bullshit you'll hear from conservative talking head types. They'll say things like, hey, maybe you should have majored in something other than basket weaving. And Jesus Christ, they still actually really make that argument. I am not kidding. Basket weaving. But they ignore that wages are flat, more people have degrees, the loans are worse, and the price of college has skyrocketed. Choice of major is so far down the list of problems that it's not even on the goddamn list. These same sorts of dorks will tell you that you shouldn't drink coffee from a coffee shop, that you eat too much kale or avocados, or that you've made poor decisions at every turn. They'll try to convince you that a world spinning down a giant drain in ever faster, ever tighter, ever deeper circles is somehow your fault because you made a choice at 18 years old. That's all bullshit. The problems are deep and they are systemic, and no amount of choosing ramen over venti half-calf coffees will change that or alter your life's trajectory. Don't let these ghouls vilify you for living a life. Oh, hey, by the way, where's your $2,000? Well, that got reduced to $1,400 before anyone even said anything to Biden. Oh, and it changed from $2,000 immediately to maybe $1,400. And you'll get that in a few months. Maybe. Yep, literally as soon as he won the election and the results were certified, oh, look at that, he lied to us again. You think this is how you win Georgia in the midterms? By not coming through on the promise you made to all those voters who flipped that state? Come on, man. You think that the Democratic Party completely failing to meet its campaign promises is going to get Biden reelected or Harris elected versus Trump or whatever mini Trump takes his place in 4 years? You are out of your mind if you do. The relative left of the Democratic Party, as well as young people and minorities, are the coalition that got Biden elected, not the corporate center. Biden pissing all of us off is his choice and it's his danger. So far, Biden has bombed foreign brown people, but he did it without insults, so that's cool, right? I mean, hey, if your insides get liquefied from the proximity effects of a high explosive detonating in your immediate vicinity, that's fine. But if the bomb is preceded or followed by a tweet calling you a mean name, then it's just beyond the pale, guys. Oh, and oh yeah, speaking of foreign dead people, Biden has allowed the Saudi crown prince to just simply walk away after murdering and literally butchering Jamal Khashoggi. The man's a real humanitarian. Got a real big heart, this guy. He's a real swell dude. And after all of that, you know what I saw a lot of people criticizing? They were foaming at the mouth because some people said Biden's dog was ugly or something. Yep, I sad laughed too. Some people said a dog was ugly or looked dirty or something, and the guns come out. Dead humans? Bombing the Middle East again? Reneging on every promise made? Giving the Saudis a pass on the death and butchering of Khashoggi? But insult a dog? Witness the impotent liberal rage. It's something to behold. And listen, to everyone who knows me personally, they know I love dogs. My wife and I have 3 beautiful greyhounds right now. We've had 4 other dogs in the past too. We have fostered over 30 retired greyhounds to get them ready for their new forever homes. We love dogs. But trust me on something. The dog in the White House does not give a shit if somebody said he was ugly or anything else at all. You know why? Because it's a dog. And as smart as German Shepherds are, they don't use Twitter. That dog doesn't give a shit what anyone said about it. It's just eating food and chilling in a giant mansion. The dog is fine. The dog is beautiful. The dog is clean. The dirtiest thing in the White House is Joe Biden's vote and policy history. That's what all of these people should have been focused on, not the dog. So yeah, speaking of swell dudes, anyone want to talk about Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York? No? Well, too bad, because I want to. Listen, I'm not here to brag, but back in episode 6, about 9, almost 10 months ago, we told you about New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. We told you how he waited too long to shut down the city and the state, and how it led to unnecessary deaths. We told you how he killed all of those senior citizens in the retirement homes. We told you how he passed up billions of dollars in federal aid just so that he could cut Medicaid in his state when medical help was the thing that his state most desperately needed, and which led to an unknown amount of suffering and death. We told you about the corruption within his party in New York and how he was destroying it from the inside. We told you about his corruption issues in Buffalo. We told you about, we just told you about his corruption. And lastly, we told you about how and why seeing a corporate Democrat speak in full sentences was no reason to support them. And you know what? I guess I lied just a little bit back there. I guess I did come here to brag. But what we didn't know back then has recently come to light. Cuomo took part in a cover-up of exactly how many nursing home residents died because of his cruel, murderous policies. I don't even know how many at this point. Last I saw, they were saying over 8,000, which is more than the 5,000 I had at the time of episode 6. So those extra 3,000 were covered up to make the governor look good. Corpses as political cover. I guess we shouldn't be surprised at the lengths that these scumbags will go to lie to us. But we keep being surprised for some unknown reason. For fuck's sake, guys. Cuomo wrote a goddamn book about responding to the COVID-19 crisis, and you made it a bestseller. Sorry, I know this sounds harsh, but those first things I listed were all well known when the book came out. It was all right there. And get this, this might be the most infuriating thing about the praise that this cruel, evil, weak little man got. He got a fucking Emmy Award for his briefings. The briefings where he lied to all of us, but he did it so nicely that people wanted him to run for president. They gave him an Emmy for that shit. And you know what? Now that I think about it, they probably should have, because that was some damn good acting. Part of me just really wants this to be a Zucker Brothers movie, just so I can more easily deal with all of this nonsense. But it isn't. Andrew Cuomo killed people with his decisions, his lack of decisions, and his corruption. Those are the plain facts of the matter. And now we find out more about his bullying of people in positions of less power than he has. And that was quickly followed with investigative accounts and firsthand accusations of his repeated and constant sexual harassment and assaults. Will the hashtag #MeToo Democrats go after Cuomo like they did Republicans? Or will they suddenly not believe women when it's inconvenient like they did with Biden? I'm betting on the latter. And here's the thing with Cuomo. None of that was enough to kill his career if it were up to voters. Like, all but the sexual harassment were public record, and still he remained a liberal favorite. We need to start asking ourselves why. The saddest thing about all of this is how Cuomo is being held to account, as little as it may be and as late as it came, and by who. It wasn't Democratic voters who are now holding this monster to account. Big money millionaire donors who bought this horrible person for decades are now deciding not to back him anymore. Did they see the light? Of course they didn't see the light. They still want to pay Cuomo, but they were afraid of the optics. So you know what they'll do instead? They'll just pay the next monster on that list and buy their soul until some horrific issues come to light and they toss that person to the side and then simply purchase the next one. It's not like they actually care about these people. The politician themselves is just the vessel which will carry their inhumane policy agenda forward and can be discarded when it no longer functions. That's how this shit works. And that's how it will work until people like you and I and everybody else actually grow a set and hold these motherfuckers accountable instead of following the media narrative and being happy that he insulted Trump and spoke in complete sentences and ignore the path of misery and destruction that this man left behind him on the path to stand behind that podium and say those soothing words. Okay, let's talk about another epic political death spiral, okay? Let's talk about garbage human being Neera Tanden for a bit. Tanden was nominated by Joe Biden to be director of the OMB, and literally minutes before I began this recording, the Biden administration pulled her nomination to that post, which is kind of awesome, because Tanden is the lowest of Washington, D.C. creatures, a sort of political remora fish. You know remoras? Those are those little fish that have evolved to attach themselves to sharks and other larger predators as a sort of symbiotic parasite sort of thing. In Tanden's case, she evolved and attached herself to the larger, scarier predator that we call Hillary Clinton. And you know, for my entire life, I thought remoras fed off of the remnants of their host meals. Like a shark would, eat a salmon or whatever it is sharks eat, and some part of that meal would float away in the water, and the remoras would detach from the shark's skin, and they would eat those bits before reattaching for the free ride. And it seemed like a fitting metaphor for Tanden's political career. She attached herself to Clinton for a free career ride and political protection, and she feeds off of the scraps that her host provides along the way. But before I sat down to do this podcast, I went to Google and I searched for remoras. I was wondering how to describe them. Were they some form of mutually beneficial organism? Were they a parasite? Or maybe there was some other, better word choice that I didn't know. But as I was reading the article, a particular sentence really hit my funny bone. And here it is. Quote, although it was initially believed that remoras fed off particulate matter from their host meals, this has been shown to be false. In reality, their diets are composed primarily of host feces. End quote. Oh, it still makes me laugh. The metaphor is even better than I thought. Neera Tanden attached herself to Clinton and now eats her shit. Spectacular. So why bring up Neera Tanden, you might be asking? And I probably should have led with this, but I really wanted to get that remora thing out of the way because it is just so perfect. But anyway, I bring her up for two reasons. One is that her nomination pissed off the same young, left-leaning coalition that helped push Biden over the top. The second is that she is a repugnant human being. Biden misread the tea leaves in every way possible here, and he did it to appease Hillary. So I guess, maybe I should rephrase. He didn't misread the tea leaves. He just didn't read them. He tried to make Hillary happy. Tanden has spent the last 6 years or so, ever since Clinton's failed run versus Trump, insulting anyone who thinks Biden or Clinton are terrible in the most vile and disgusting ways imaginable. I mean, for real, she really was a cruel person. Oh, and she spent that time physically assaulting people as well. A real humanitarian. It was kind of funny as people noticed her deleting over 1,000 tweets in an attempt to cover her tracks, and then see all the screenshots coming out and hear all the awkward questions at her nomination hearing. And that entire time, as she verbally and physically assaults half the country in unhinged tirades, she has super predator Hillary protecting her and allowing her to eat her shit. And listen, all of that is grist for the humor mill, except the assault part, of course, but Tanden has darker, more substantial skeletons in her closet as well. Neera Tanden very loudly and very forcefully maintains herself as an opponent to universal, single-payer healthcare, the single most needed policy in this country. She is steadfast in wanting to cut and hamstring entitlement programs like Social Security. She is against programs that help the poor and disadvantaged, even after seeing them help her own family when she was young. And the person she famously assaulted, his sin was taking the position that Tanden was wrong about Libya when she said that Libyans are quote-unquote indebted to us. Yeah, indebted to us for throwing their country into a civil war, and that they should be forced to repay us, meaning the United States, with their oil. Oh, and she also outed a sexual assault survivor in a staff meeting. So, yeah, this is not a good person. Not as a friend, and certainly not as head of any part of our government. And now she's facing a sort of comeuppance, as her nomination rightfully goes up in smoke. She managed to hit a point where even the famed Clinton super predator shark she attached herself to can't help her anymore because Neera destroyed her own reputation and career by her own actions. And the Clintons themselves are on the downslope of the power curve. Neera Tanden swam next to Clinton and ate her shit all along the way, and I hope she gets nothing for it aside from a distinguished career as a servile shit eater. Now, what does all of that mean? Why did I rant about all of this stuff today? Well, there's two things here, two primary things at least. First of all is this. The Democratic Party has 2 years to do things. Just 2 years. Well, I mean, actually, it's more like 22 months at this point, right? Because they haven't done shit yet. 22 months to make real improvement and real gains and get voters back on board. Right now, Biden and the rest of the Democratic Party are utterly failing to do any of this. And you know what? I said 22 months, but it's probably more like 14 or something like that because the midterms will be in full swing by then. And if Biden delivers nothing, the Democrats will get destroyed in those elections and lose both houses of Congress, and then another Trump figure, or maybe even another Trump, or even the Trump, will sit in that Oval Office again. If that happens, there will be no voters left willing to vote blue no matter who to bail us out. Biden is burning those bridges as we speak. And so long as people who want change on the leftish side of the aisle sit on their hands and say, well, he's better than Trump, and they don't do anything at all to make this country better, they're going to lose it to the fascistic right. And if and when they do lose it, it will be all of our faults. The second reason, and really the more pertinent one right now, is just to show that I said bad things about politicians. And that's okay to do. I really want people to understand that it's okay to shit on a politician and demand that they do what you want. It's okay to learn something new about somebody you voted for and just say, yeah, that person is a monster. I don't like them anymore. You don't have to defend them to the point of lunacy. These are bad people to begin with. They do not care about you. And I'm starting to feel like those last two things I said, that these people are bad and they do not care about you, those things are turning into catchphrases because I say them so much, but it's true. These politicians are best viewed as your enemy, even ones you voted for who claim to support some things you like. Biden claimed he wanted to raise the minimum wage. He said he did not want to start new wars. He said he'd forgive student debt and that he'd undo the evils of Trump. Right now, he's 0 for eternity on all of those issues. He hasn't really fought for a damn one of them, not a single one. Think about that, then think about why you feel like you have to defend him instead of yelling at him. About the only thing he has been honest about this entire time is his devotion to the healthcare and health insurance industries and his lack of give a shit about all of us who are out here dying broke and hungry and homeless. Yet you stick up for him. You stick up for all of these people. Why? Because Biden is better than Trump? Please, you know that's a bad platform to have. It makes no sense to die on that hill. And Cuomo said reassuring, politically correct words at the height of the COVID crisis in New York. Yeah, he did. But he was also verbally abusing and sexually assaulting and harassing underlings and women at the same time. He was also corrupt and just plain a bad person for many, many years before COVID hit. Why do we refuse to admit this and move on? Neera Tanden is a woman of color, and it would be nice to see more of them head agencies in our government, right? Yeah, sure, I agree. But she's also cruel, spiteful, and her politics are basically Republican. Why defend her? All of these things can be true. Biden can be better than Trump. Cuomo could deliver a message of competence that's full of intelligence and empathy. And Tanden can be a woman of color nominated to head an agency. But they can remain bad people at their cores. We need to recognize these dissonant images and truths and understand that it's okay to acknowledge them and that it's okay to dump on bad politicians. It's okay even to demand resignations and to hold these monsters responsible for their actions up to and including involvement of police in criminal proceedings. If we fear that, if we fear holding people to account for their immoral, unethical, and even illegal actions, then we fear change. And if we fear change, then change will never come. And that's the episode, everybody. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please take a moment to give us a rating and maybe even a review on Apple Podcasts. I will include a link in the description. Thank you all again. I love you all.